So I had plans to do a follow-up video specifically after the Pride video I did last week, talking about the protest and some of the fallout. And I guess this is about as close as I'm going to get to that video for the time being. Things have been pretty chaotic following last week. There's been a lot of discussion, which has been amazing. But also, one of the fun things that happens after any kind of major organization is that a lot of people are very, very burned out. I've been working pretty much nonstop. My girlfriend was bugging me because she's like, I would give you a hard time about not doing chores, but there are no minutes in the day for you to do them. So that's kind of been my week, which means that I haven't really been able to compile all of the information that I've wanted to around things that have happened as a result of the protests that happened at Pride. So instead of doing a really in-depth discussion around it, I think what I'll be doing is just give you a bit of an idea of what some of the things I've seen and what I think we should do next, where we should go from here as a community or as a group of interconnected communities. One of the best things that's come of last weekend is there have been an immense amount of conversations around police in Pride and around inclusion in Pride and what it means to be included in Pride, as well as what it means to when you're an individual who maybe doesn't see the same forms of discrimination as someone else. I've seen a lot of social media conversations around intersectionality, and I've been, for the most part, really, really proud of how civil they've been. And considering how the protests started over the weekend and things were pretty chaotic. I saw over the Saturday night, the Sunday morning, the Sunday night, the Monday, and even a little bit into the Tuesday, we're having a lot of conversations around what really happened, first off, and how to react as a community when someone else says, hey, what you're doing is hurting me, or hey, you're straight up ignoring my needs. There are still a lot of people who are angry. There are still a lot of people who are hurt. There are still a lot of people who don't understand. And unfortunately, all we can do is keep the conversation moving in that regard. One thing that's been pretty heartening for me is that the festival has yet to back down from the demands. They've stuck with what they agreed to on the day. We'll see how long that lasts. I've seen other organizations agree to something under duress and then walk it back afterwards. And personally, I find that pretty problematic. But we'll see. So some of the negative stuff that's happened has really given me a lot of cause for concern. First off, the organizers of the protest itself are pretty much universally burned out. A lot of them were re-traumatized and unexpectedly re-traumatized by members of the community who set the groundwork for the work that they were trying to accomplish on Saturday. Burnout like this is not a single event. It's not a single protest. It's not a single conversation. No. The single conversation is what tips a person over after they've had months and months and months and months of conversations with someone to no avail. And then it comes to a head. And that's what's happened in this case. We had ongoing conversations happening between those who ended up protesting and the Pride Festival. And what happened was they were ignored. As I added in the corrections, there was a letter sent out to the Pride Festival. There were meetings. This is not the first year that this conversation has been attempted. And so when you think about how a long conversation like that, that's just kind of pushed off the table every year and then month after month, it really does drain a person. So we've seen some burnout. The conversation still hasn't finished yet. There's still a long way to go. And so all of the organizers who've put countless hours into setting up conversations prior to Pride and who are now post involvement in an event that was highly traumatic. Now they're largely in recovery mode. And I know some of my friends who are in that boat right now, and I'm sending a lot of love to them today because I know it's been a week and there's a lot of healing and self-recovery that has to happen for them. So there's one more negative aspect of the fallout from this, the direct fallout from this, that I think is really important to let people know has happened. And that is that there have been direct threats against one of the individuals who was involved in the counter-protest. This person, I'm in contact with them on social media. And so essentially what happened is there was a guy who was at the protest who took part in the protest or the counter-protest, and he was spewing racist shit, and he was telling people to go back home to their country of origin, which is garbage. Unfortunately, one of the other people who was in his group, who had kind of come to the front with the leather group, was billed through a misinterpreted photo as having made these threats, as opposed to the person who actually did. So there's this guy who's, I don't think he's entirely blameless. I've seen other posts by him that imply that he was happy that they led a counter-protest, and personally I'm not a huge fan of that. But I do have footage of him from last Saturday telling people to not be violent, to de-escalate, to stop yelling, to step back and think about what they're doing. So even if this person was on the other side of the cops and pride conversation, one thing he wasn't was actively racist. His actions may have been propping up someone who was racist, and I'm not going to speak to that right now, but what I am going to speak to is how inappropriate it is in any circumstance to issue death threats against any individual. I don't think it's appropriate. And here's why. Because we as a society have seen this growing shift away from discussion and debate, and we've seen this increased shift towards polarity in our conversations, us versus them, and lack of nuance. It's very black and white in a lot of our society right now, and it's not okay. I don't know who issued this death threat. I don't know the contents of this death threat. All I know is that it was a credible death threat and that he is currently off the grid. He's not sharing his location with anyone. All that said, I think the level of reaction from both sides of the conversation, and when I say both sides, I mean people who have formed opinions. There are a lot of folks who are kind of in the middle or are of two minds of it. But when it comes to, people who've chosen to stand on one side of this conversation or another, there have been a lot of conversations happening. I've been really proud of the folks in the leather community and in the BDSM community for saying that no, if you were involved in a racist tirade against someone at a counter-protest, you're not going to be a speaker at their event. I think that's fantastic, and I think that's what we need to be doing. I think we also need to make sure that those people who are engaged in the racist tirades are called in by their own community to have a conversation about what they're doing, really, like what it really looks like, not just from their perspective, but from the perspectives of everyone involved, as well as making sure that those individuals have a chance to, in a place that's not going to further polarize their views and further drive them to extremist views. I want to see people re-educate. And I hate using that word because it sounds like something out of friggin' dystopian sci-fi. But I think it's important that we help people see other people as humans, first off, right? That's the most important part of this. And so if you can reach out to people who you know who are personally bigoted, who have personally have bigoted views, the best thing you can do is sit them down, let them vent out all of their views, and then talk about people as humans with them. Because once they vent out their, they think they've been heard, they feel like they've been heard, and you say, oh, I see why you maybe got to that perspective. Here's why I think that's maybe incorrect. Here's why I think that, my friend X feels like this. The statistics show this. Pulling out facts and showing people through a human lens is really, really important to continuing these conversations. And I think that's what's really important that we as a community here in Edmonton and globally continue to try to do, is keep the conversation going. Because as soon as the conversation stops, then that means that we have no chance to change people's minds, right? Real conversations are tiring. And I don't think that the people who are directly experiencing trauma at the hands of the consequences of those conversations should be the ones who are obligated to be part of them. I think that's really unfair to put that on people. And that's why I think it's important that we try to place ourselves in the role of ally or accomplice when it comes to people who are experiencing marginalization by the hands of folks like us. And when I say like us, yes, usually it does come down to race, because we still are in a very racially motivated society. That's a lot. So, where do we go next? Is a big question, and is really important, because where we go next, I think, will dictate the future of queer communities in Edmonton. And I think this conversation is not just happening in Edmonton, it's happening in Toronto, it's happening in Calgary, I know it's happening down in the States, I know it's happening in other Canadian cities, and I'm sure it's happening worldwide. So how do we engage with these things, and how do we keep making sure that the outcomes are the best for all of us? Really, what it comes down to is educating ourselves, and then taking the initiative to have those tough conversations when we can and when it's safe, and making sure that we don't burn out. Because right now, there is a small group of individuals who are organizing and who are enacting major change, and they're doing it here in Edmonton, and they're doing it in Calgary, and they're doing it in Toronto, and they're doing it in Vancouver, and down in the States, and globally. There are these small pockets of individuals who are taking the reins. The problem is that they can't have a million little conversations with people, and those million little conversations that stem from the bigger political actions, like the protest at Pride, those little conversations are what are going to end up changing a lot of people's minds, who maybe are already polarized in their views. So, yeah, take the time, have those conversations. And when you call people on their garbage, on their bigoted views, do it in a way that allows them to feel like they're still being heard, because there's probably some form of valid emotional cause for them to feel the way they do. And if we can just pat them on the back and say, I understand that this is how you ended up at this viewpoint, here's why maybe it's not the correct viewpoint, and maybe you as a compassionate and whole human being might want to change your opinion, or might want to look into other viewpoints with a different, more nuanced perspective. I think if we can do that, the whole planet really is going to be better off. So, all that said, I'm filming the first wedding of the season for me right now. This is the latest I've started a wedding season in quite a while, and it's okay. I'm pretty okay with that. I've been working on a lot of other things. Speaking of which, I had a film screening for A Long Road to Peace last week. We had a great turnout. The captions are finally done for it. They weren't done for the premiere, so we had a bunch of people out who couldn't come due to lack of captions. So now the film is a little bit more accessible, a little bit more enjoyable, and I've also edited a little bit because it needed some cleaning up. Still does, but I'm going to spend the rest of today filming this wedding. I'm going to edit this up Saturday night and hopefully post it Saturday night or maybe Sunday morning. And I hope that Edmonton, you can help me keep the conversation going around this, and don't let it be forgotten. Don't let the protest and the conversation that's come out of it and the work that's been done since then, don't let it be forgotten. We've already come a long way, and there's still a very, very long way to go as far as making sure everyone feels like they're safe coming to Pride. There was an article last week in, I don't remember where it came out, but there was an article that came out talking about how LGBTQ women as a whole don't feel welcome at Pride. Can't remember the specifics. I can't remember where it was from. I'll try and find the link again and stick it down in the doobly-doo. But I think that really speaks to the fact that right now Pride as a whole needs some fixing. And this is a really good opportunity to do a lot of good change for a lot of people. We've got the opportunity to get everyone into the conversation properly, and we wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for the work of the folks who organized this protest. So whether you agree with them or not, now you have a chance at more public dialogue, and I think that's really, really important. Keep an eye on this space. I'm going to try to keep everyone updated on what happens with the Edmonton Pride Festival and the ongoing discussions there. There will be more discussions between the community and the Pride Festival, as well as the organizers of the parade and the festival. I'll keep you updated. In the meantime, this week, you're probably going to see a couple of different videos from me. One I'm hoping to have up kind of towards the end of the week that's going to be on prepping for a canoe trip that I have coming up, so a completely different kind of feel than what you've been seeing. And of course, then we have the canoe trip itself. So I turned 30 this year. I decided that one of the things that I needed to do was get out, get on a canoe, and learn how to do something new. So I'm going to do a canoe trip prep video, and then Kaylee and I, my partner, we're going to go out to northern Alberta, and we're going to do a 4-day canoe trip. So I hope you stick around, come back for that. If you haven't, like, subscribe, all of that junk, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.